Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mudahar, and I love talking about video gaming. Now, this video's got a lot of positivity, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure Nvidia hates video gamers. Okay, pretty substantially. I stand by that 100%. Now, the reason why I come out telling you that Nvidia hates the gamers is I'm just gonna rip the Band-Aid off straight up and tell you guys, ladies and gentlemen, that we're at a point where things are at such shortages that Nvidia's CEO is going around saying, yeah, we might resurrect some old graphic cards. We might sell you some old slop here, some old inventory, because, guys, we're too busy selling off the good stuff to all those big AI companies out there. So, again, I don't want to just mince words here. I feel like there's a lot of clickbait on the internet, but I'm just going to give you the man's words right here. So Paul Alcorn from Tom's Hardware goes, hey Jensen, the price of gaming GPUs, especially the latest and greatest, are really becoming high, which might be due to some restrictions on supply and production capacity, one would assume. Yeah, I feel like that really is just, you hit the nail on the head there, pal. Do you think that maybe spinning up production on some of the older generation GPUs on older process nodes where there might be more available production would help with that? And then, of course, the CEO of the company goes, yeah, I mean, possibly. We could possibly, depending on which generation. And we could also bring the latest generational AI technology to the previous generation GPUs. That'll require a fair amount of engineering, but it's also within the realm of possibility. I'm going to go back and take a look at this. It's a good idea. Now, you might be wondering, oh man, that sounds like, a question. That sounds like an answer on the spot, Muda. And the reality of it is that, look, he's probably got to go back to the bean counters, go, hold on, guys. Is supporting the gaming community beneficial for us as a company? Do we make money with the big AI boys? Or do we make money with the gamers? No, Nvidia's not going to side with the gamers, dumbass. Their stock prices wouldn't be friendly with that. Get the fuck out of here. Now, of course, obviously for me, I'm at a point where I think Nvidia just straight up does not care much for gaming. And it kind of burns me because when you look at the graphic card market, right? Nvidia is kind of like the top dog, okay? They're like the goddamn Chanel of graphics cards. They're the bee's knees, if you will. The beef filet mignon. They're usually the ones with kind of the best technology, the best actual hardware, Really, if you're talking about the strongest graphics cards on the market, probably Team Green. And then, of course, you get Team Red with AMD, where, AMD is not bad. I'm not going to say they're terrible, especially if you're a Linux gamer like me. They're actually not bad cards, but they're never going to, the best of the AMD is never going to match to the best of Nvidia, okay? You really don't have a competitor in that line. And I don't know what the fuck Intel is doing. Never bought an Intel GPU. I don't even know anybody that owns an Intel GPU. But I have heard that in some cases they're pretty goddamn cool. Look, at the end of the day, Nvidia is kind of where most of the lion market share is, okay? Most people buy Nvidia GPUs. And unfortunately, we're at a point where, times be tough. AI companies be grabbing all of our hardware, and we gamers might have to consider looking into the past just to get a GPU at reasonable prices. Because if you look at some of the prices for, a lot of GPUs nowadays, the prices be bad, okay? If you go to Canada Computers, for instance, a RAM kit that is 32 gigabytes is up there at $371, which absolutely hurts every part of my soul to see, and that's actually if it's even available. But Muda, what about a graphics card? Well, if you want to get that 5090, for instance, right, a 5090 is going to run you, in some cases, $2,899 at the cheapest. That's not even available anymore, okay? So let's just scratch that out of the mix. Now, there are some for like $3,800, $3,600, $4,100. For context, a Canadian $3,824 is actually equivalent to a $2,768 American. You still probably can't fucking afford it, but that's what the prices look like, okay? It's not good. Buying a top-scale GPU has just blown up beyond proportion. Back in the day, I swear to God, when I looked at the most expensive GPUs on the market, this is when I was substantially younger, substantially happier in life. You know, there were GPUs that were like $1,000 of the most expense, right? Like you had the GTX Titan, and I used to sit there and be like, what kind of fucking rich fuck buys that? And unfortunately, it seems like $1,000 is what you have to pay to pretty much get like the entry to mid-level GPU. Maybe the mid-level is where it is. I shouldn't say that I'm unhappy in life. I'm actually very happy in life. I've got an amazing partner. I've got an amazing family. I've got good things going on, okay? I just wanted to like recorrect that, okay? Karma be a bitch sometimes. So I gotta be thankful where I'm thankful at. But a lot of gamers can't really be thankful because shit is expensive. Trying to build a computer these days? What are you, fucking crazy? They cost as much as a car these days, and so you can get a used motor vehicle. Okay, I swear to God, there are computers nowadays, when you put the build together, they cost more than my first car, my first used vehicle. All right, crazy shit. I've been kind of blown away with is like, you know, why is everything getting super duper expensive? Well, one of the projects that I saw, and this is a deviation from the Nvidia thing, and I had to mention in this video because it really blew my mind away. Now, this is not April 1st, okay? If you look at the day right now, it's January 7th, okay? So this is not April, but this is something from Razer, different company, even though it's green. It's you know, I feel like green is just related to douche in the tech sphere. But this is Project Ava. Now, what is this Project Ava, you might be wondering? Oh, well, this is a desk companion. Meet Ava, your 24/7 AI companion, designed to live right alongside you. I want to die, dude. I want to fucking die. Powered by advanced AI, Ava features a dynamic personality that learns and evolves based on your interaction. Let me check what AI powers this, by the way. Hold on, let me do a quick check. For now, Ava is based on xAI's Grok engine, but has an open and scalable architecture. Oh, that seems like a great AI to put it on. The one that was undressing little children and shit. That seems great. That seems awesome. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I want to show you a little video of this shit too. Like, the whole concept is like you just have this little like anime hentai ooh girl sitting there. This poor fuck has to get out of bed and talk to an AI. You know what's crazy? There was a show back in the day called Code Monkeys. You know, it used to air on G4 TV. There was a character in there called Todd. And Todd had no friends. Todd was a smelly fucking virgin neckbeard. Todd's only friend was a little AI buddy he had on him. It was supposed to be a joke, right? Todd has no friends except ones and zeros. We're at a point where Todd's AI exists for you to buy. So put on those fucking cat ears and talk to your AI friend, your AI husbando, your AI waifu, your AI daddy, if you will. That's kind of, that's why, this is why RAM costs so much, okay? Is because some people can have a permanent goon cum jar sitting on the side, powered by xAI or whatever AI they want in the future. But, you know, ultimately, the end of the day, right, like, one of the things that AI has kind of done, at least for Nvidia, is allow them to push what I believe is some of the fakest marketing bullshit that I have ever seen. So there's a game called Resident Evil Requiem that I'm really excited to play. It actually looks pretty goddamn awesome. Now, one of the things that I saw over here was another blatant example of Nvidia's marketing fucking gimmicks and lies. So I wanted to walk you through this, okay? Now, mind you, this is a game that I'm excited for, and if you're looking at the footage for it, it looks pretty damn good. Like, Resident Evil RE Engine games are genuinely, in my opinion, some of the best things. Now, Resident Evil comes with something known as path tracing. Now, for anybody that doesn't know what path tracing is, okay, there's regular rasterized lighting that you've probably seen in video games. You know, you play something like Metal Gear Solid 5, shit looks pretty damn good. Now, ray tracing, you know, that's when lighting is calculated by rays that are firing off in the game's engine and hitting various objects, therefore creating a realistic depiction of how light bounces and works in a natural environment. That's how reflections end up looking good, shadows look good, yada, yada, yada. Games take a lot of processing power when they do ray tracing. Now, when you want to deal with things like ray tracing or even path tracing, to show you some comparisons, I brought up Grand Theft Auto 5 as I thought it serves as a pretty good way to understand and to show you visually how these things sort of play around. Now, at Franklin's house, if you look at, for instance, the non-path traced image and the path traced image, or ray traced rather, and I'll put up indicators on the screen that show you which images, running in traditional lighting or not, you can actually see that, on first glance, you may not notice things. But look very carefully at images like this, for instance, where when you zoom into specific corners, you can see that the ray traced version actually has much more realistic bounce lighting. So when the light kind of hits around various objects, you can see that various colors start to bleed and affect other colors, how light works naturally. Reflections, for instance, are much more clearer and make more sense in the ray traced version because they're just usually calculating the actual reflections based on rays that are traced, the data that is generated with the traced rays in this case. Now, obviously, there are better examples too. For instance, in the parking garage, you can see that the ray-traced version has light that's bleeding into the edges. So as sunlight comes in, it bounces across the various objects, and it looks far more realistic. Whereas without the ray tracing, you can see that it looks a bit flatter. You can even see on the ground the reflections of various vehicles driving by make more sense in the ray-traced version as opposed to the regular. That said, if you don't really think these are important visual additions, because ultimately in the end, this all just hinges on the fact that if you have the graphic hardware for it, enable these features. There is definitely a performance hit, like you are on average losing like 50 to 60 frames, and mind you, this is me enabling things like frame generation, because in order to make this work, we have to use something known as upscaling. There's a way this magic can be done, and it comes at a cost. So how do we achieve this? So what you would do is you would render the game internally at a lower resolution, something like 720p, for instance, meaning that you could ray trace really well, but 720p looks like dog shit on a 1080p screen. So what DLSS would do is it would render that 720p and use AI to upscale that image so that it looked closer to 1080p. Now, when this technology first came out, it didn't look like it was 1080p, but it looked better than 720. Now, in the last couple years, DLSS super resolution has actually gotten so good that even a upscaled image can actually look as good as native sometimes, at least in my experience. I have no issue with DLSS, especially when it provides performance boosts for older GPUs. That's kind of what I thought it was there for, right? Like, let's say you had an old GPU, couldn't run games like Resident Evil well, but through DLSS, your GPU would probably get like an extra 2 years. Now it seems like developers just want to use this technology instead of actually optimizing their game. So to show you guys what Resident Evil looks like with path tracing, now path tracing is ray tracing, but a far more aggressive form, right? Where it's bouncing a lot more, calculations, it's doing a lot more things all at once. And it leads to some pretty cool visuals under the right circumstances. So games like Cyberpunk 2077 look fucking great. However, when you enable path tracing, even on a 4090 like my system, frame rates go all the way down to like fucking 20, okay? Sometimes even less. So you need to, mind you, then generate fake frames in order to make the game look somewhat playable and fluid. So to give you an idea, this is like their showcase for ray tracing. Now again, I want to kind of look at the visuals for you. So when you see the RTX off, I feel like that's when they run the game at the lowest fucking possible settings, just so the actual visual difference looks huge, okay? Like, hey, marketing is a crazy game. Now obviously, for a lot of people, you probably look at this and be like, damn, the game looks fucking great. And I think it looks great. I think that game looks poggers, all right? The lighting is pretty solid, NPCs look cool. It looks really nice. I'm excited to play this game. Now, when you enable ray tracing on, RTX on, you can see that, whoa, okay, so what changed? Well, I'm going to point things out for you real quickly just so you guys understand, so it's not marketing fluff. For instance, look up at this little sign, right? Great Plate Champions. Now with RTX on, you see that little orange hue? Well, it's because path tracing is actually calculating the light that's off screen, so there's probably like a orange or like street light or something that is flying into this and it looks realistic. For instance, you can see that the reflections look much more sharper in certain cases. The light in that distance, shadows render far accurately. It looks closer to reality. Now, obviously, with the ray tracing off, for instance, you can see the Great Plate Champions doesn't have that light cast onto it. You can see that these shadows are not rendered in the way that they want. Now, if you couldn't identify any of this without me pointing it out, then you probably didn't care about this visuals anyways. Not to say that I'm against these kind of visuals. I think this kind of shit is cool. I think it's interesting to see ray and path tracing. However, I really think that mileage really varies. Like, honestly, if the game looks this good, I'll probably play it without those, enhancements, just for the more fluid frame rate, especially in a game that's about survival horror, especially in a game where input is important, especially a first-person horror game where I need to make sure my shots hit important. This ain't like Cyberpunk, boys. This is Resident Goddamn Evil. Now, the frame rate is where I get most excited about, right? Like, obviously, the visuals look interesting over here. Like, this is where it looks less pronounced to me. Like, RTX off, for instance, looks like this. Obviously, some of these reflections are dog shit. And then, of course, enabling RTX on, I really don't see much difference in the grand scheme of lighting. But yeah, the reflections just look sharper at the end of the day. Like, honestly, right here, I cannot even begin to fucking tell you the actual key difference in visuals. To me, I honestly feel like that looks like the same goddamn image. It really is just the actual reflections where things are a little better. Actually, a fair bit better. So this is with them off. This is with them on. Just looks a little brighter and sharper, that's it. Now the frame rate is where it is really a fun thing. So when you have all this path tracing shit enabled, right, DLSS off, this card, whatever card they're running on, is at 58 frames per second. Now I love these fucking benchmarks that they provide. They did not give any indication of what the actual system was running on. They just gave a frame counter. So all right, 58, 57. Oh shit, now it's 198? 301? Damn, dude, those monitors that I'm running can finally actually push those frame rates. No, the reality is these are all fake fucking frames. And in fact, I didn't know how bad the fake frames situation got until I realized how many were actually generating. Now, I've played multi-frame generation stuff, and I'll tell you something right now, the input lag is noticeable. It's not as terrible as some would say, but you'll definitely notice it. If you play any game with frame generation, you will feel the actual input lag, especially if you're using mouse and keyboard. Now, if you're on like a controller, I think it's a little bit better there, but it definitely is noticeable. Because there is a cost, right? You can't just generate shit out of thin air and expect it to work. This is one of the things that I wish Nvidia kind of explained far better. And I feel like most people don't really understand why it's as sluggish as it is. So we're actually at what appears to be multi-frame generation up to 6 times. So what that effectively means, ladies and gentlemen, is to give you an idea of what this works is when you're playing a video game, every frame you see, if you have 6x enabled, that basically means you take 6 frames, right? One of them is real. One of them is actually the real frame. And the other 5 are fake frames that are generated through Nvidia. So that basically means, look, as a 4090 user that can use frame generation officially, basically with 2 times frame generation, around half of what you're seeing on the screen is basically fake copium made up by the driver. At 6 times, the vast majority of whatever you're seeing on the screen is an AI frame that is made up. You're actually seeing more AI on your screen than nothing. Now, in general, this wouldn't necessarily be the baddest thing in the world, but at the end of the day, for a lot of these new games that are coming out and them showing the actual performance, it feels kind of disingenuous to sell a multiple $1,000 graphic card that is mostly generating fake frames in order to make this kind of stuff work. The reality is, the kind of visuals that Nvidia and a lot of these companies are pushing is simply too much for the hardware. It really is. So in order to make up for it, what they've done is they've just basically pushed low resolution images, upscaled, and generating the remainder of frames that they need in order to make things work. And ultimately, that's just kind of the reality of the situation. It feels to me like a lot of false advertising. These GPUs are not substantially stronger. They're just better at generating fake nonsense than anything. When you turn all of these assists off, the actual boons and benefits you see from generation to generation aren't really as pronounced as they actually should be. To me, it almost feels like a weird cheat that Nvidia pushes. But, we've talked about this before, and ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't think Nvidia really cares. They're not really even a graphics card company to me. They're more of an AI company at this point. One of the other goofy things that I saw Jensen Huang say, this will actually blow your mind. I actually had to research this even deeper just to make sure that I wasn't misreading anything. Nvidia's CEO was praising robots as fucking AI immigrants, dude. Jesus Christ. This is how insane the AI bros have gotten. Having robots will create jobs, Huang tells 200 journalists. And again, this is all in the midst. The reason we're finding this out is because CES is happening. And CES is basically turned into a convention that doesn't really show consumers the electronics they can buy. Just shows consumers electronics that are mostly unaffordable. And if they are affordable, they're usually just AI cum jars that you can buy, right? We need more AI immigrants to help us on manufacturing floors and do work that maybe we've decided not to do anymore. Bitch, what the fuck do you mean AI immigrants, brother? What are we doing in society anymore? They're basically saying, yeah, hold on, guys. We're going to get the AIs to do the jobs that we don't want. But, I mean, you could say that, but, like, what the fuck do you mean AI immigrants, dude? Like, it sounds to me like some of the most derogatory shit that I hear. And maybe it comes from, like, out of touch, it's like the most out of touch California tech bro shit that I've probably ever heard. A robotics revolution will compensate for labor losses from aging populations and demographic decline while boosting the economy. Look, at the end of the day, these people don't give a shit about the economy. We're at a critical junction in life, in the world. And that's the reason why I kind of talk about this more and more. A lot of people are like, man, this is kind of really depressing, but at the end of the day, we really have to confront this, okay? Because, look, things are going to get bad before they get better. We're at a point where a lot of these billionaire scumbags want to basically take the little that you have and consolidate it to them, right? They basically want you to live in a world where you don't own anything. And we're getting to a point where, like, these people are pushing a technology, and they're pushing a technology that, isn't entirely perfect, but ultimately they want to get to a point where they can take away as many means of income people can have, just so they can the few people that are already rich can get even richer, at the behest of everyone else's safe and well-being. And the people that kind of sit around and think we're going to be in an age of fucking abundance because AI is going to be doing everything that we want are sorely mistaken, or at the very, very malicious end, they just don't care about you, and really they're pushing for something that, these are grifters that ultimately are pushing a technology that they themselves know is very dangerous if it's not completely checked, if it's not completely introduced in a proper manner, right? These are people that are making a bag right now because they think that they can make enough at the moment to survive down the road, when they're not really looking at the long term in a proper sense, right? Like, to me, if you ask me what an AI is going to be doing for the future of humanity, right, I'm at a loss for word, because most of the stuff that I've covered regarding artificial intelligences, especially generative stuff, has mostly been negative, okay? There's very little positivity in this space, too. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, look, Nvidia does not give a shit about gamers. Gamers, when buying Nvidia stuff, have to usually pick between real performance or frame generating, and no amount of frame generating is ever going to feel... In fact, the more frames you generate, the worse the latency ends up becoming. There's very little things that you can do to actually make up for actual lack of performance. And I don't know what the future of Nvidia really is. I don't think that they're really going to care that much about gaming down the road anyways, especially when we're already thinking about bringing in old stock just for the gamers. Because ultimately, in the end, they're more interested in selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of their product to, like, Chinese AI farms or American AI farms. That is where the money is right now, at least in their mind. Now, the only good saving grace to some of this is when you actually look at what's been happening with a lot of these AI data centers. So to tie off this video and end on a really positive note, there is actually a massive uptick in data center opposition. So all over the United States, a lot of people have been signing not just petitions, but there have been many activist groups that have sparked up basically opposing billions of dollars of AI infrastructure entering into their area. And you might be like, but Muda, opposing AI coming into your area, doesn't that seem stupid? Like they'll just move billions of dollars elsewhere. The reality is when these guys bring in their data centers, ultimately they jack up prices all around you, and the jobs they create are very few and far between. More people actually lose than gain in these situations. So the more these activist groups spark up, the more they resist and fight back, the less of these AI bros get to build their massive data centers. Not to say all data centers are bad. We've had data centers for a long fucking time. But with these AI ones, it seems like they're just coming in, and again, the massive amount of compute resources for this technology and the massive amount of resources it takes, in my opinion, usually is not worth the cost that it does to the community and again, to people's general mind. We've already gotten to a point where AI has provably shown that it is brain rotting the shit out of human beings. And, you know, even when you look at it as a technology for gamers, right? Like, technology to me is not evil. But you know, there's a lot of decent applications for things like artificial intelligence. DLSS, for instance, Nvidia's upscaling. That's pretty cool. I think that's interesting for AI. That's a pretty cool application. Self-driving vehicles, if perfected, pretty cool way for AI to integrate with our lives. Generative nonsense used to misinform the people and constantly flood our internet with shit that we never asked for. Not an interesting facet, but one that's heavily pushed by these organizations. But to see a lot of these organizations resist and fight back, and a lot of people actually understanding the real harms that these people bring, it's a good thing to see projects being blocked and delayed and opposition starting to form. Because the more this happens, right, there's two ways that this goes down, right? We either oppose this kind of stuff in the manner that it's built now, or these companies actually get their shit together and make this stuff more energy efficient than it actually currently is. Because that's really you have to make this technology sustainable. If it's not sustainable, this bubble is gonna pop. And at least the best part about the bubble popping is that Nvidia either has to come groveling back to gamers, which is gonna be sweet to witness anyways, but the hardware that they're making, once this shit pops, finally becomes at least available on the open market. Not for astronomical prices, but finally for a price that a gamer can actually afford. Not a fucking, tech bro billionaire, multi-millionaire that doesn't have to think about anything. The average gamer can at least afford it. And if you think it's bad for PC gamers, remember, these are the same parts in silicone that go inside gaming consoles and various other pieces of technology. So the quicker the stuff stops, the faster we as gamers and we as consumers can actually get back to the technology we love, instead of seeing it regress and entering sort of some level of a dark age at this point. Anyways, this is me, Mudahar. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like if you dislike it, I am out.